Hey everyone, welcome back to the Somoza Show. Today it is my pleasure to once again have Attorney Vera Zambrano with us. This is the criminal justice series, and if you missed some of our previous podcast episodes, you can visit our channel, or you can also visit Attorney Vera Zambrano's YouTube channel, and we'll give you that information at the end of the conversation today. Vera, welcome back on the show. Thank you for making some time for us today.
Yes, thank you so much for having me, and I hope you had a great week so far.
Yes. Very productive. It's March is off to a great start. So yeah, we're excited. So thank you. So let's just jump into this, right? We have a lot of cool stuff to talk about and very little time. So today what we're discussing is the public defender system, right? How can nationwide, how can we fix this system? So it's a solution oriented conversation. And we're also going to be discussing whether, who does this benefit, right? Because it would be easy, right, to make the assumption that it only benefits people that are poor or only people that are guilty, right? So we're going to be discussing that. And just to give the proper setup, right? During our last episode, we talked about how funding, funding versus quality, right? Quality representation by the public defender's office. We talked about how funding is definitely important, but in addition to that, and Vera, you made this point, there's also got to be passion, right? The attorney's got to be passionate about what he's doing to be able to get the right recipe, to get the right results at the end, right? It's almost like a recipe. You got the funding, but you also got to have the passion. So, so Vera, I'm gonna kick us off with some questions that have to do with I like to define some of these terms. So let's start off with the first one. How do we define quality representation by public defenders? Can we start with that? Can you give us what your definition would be?
Yeah, so when you think about, the public defender has to be someone that is, qualified in the first place, right? Quality, you can think about, the attorney has to have the skill set, right? The legal skill set, the experience, right? And what is most important is he has to provide the effective and diligent representation, right? That means client-based, right? You have to focus on your client, not so much on, like how you usually handle those kind of cases. You have to step away a little bit from, also how you handled other cases that, might be similar, but no case is the same. So you have to focus on your client, dedicate enough time to your client, which can be a problem we talk about later. And also what means equality means you have to include like a proper communication style, right? You have to visit your client, you have to talk to your client, you have to listen to your client also, right? In order to, find the best strategy, your defense, right? That is, you have to build it very strong, right? You cannot trust that the state attorney is going to make a mistake or the police work is not completely, firm. You have to, build a strategy that will not fail. So that means you have to dedicate a lot of time and effort and motivation.
Yeah, I love that. I think you covered it well there. So let's jump into some of the more complicated questions. And I say complicated, maybe it's complicated is not the right word. It's more the more critical questions, the more interesting questions in the sense that it's misconceptions that people might have, right? So the question is this: having a quality public defender system, does that only benefit poor people? And what I mean by poor people, and maybe that's a bad term to be using, but what I mean by that is people that are just low income, right? Does it just benefit individuals that are low income?
Yeah, that's a very provocative statement that you're saying there. So to be clear, every person, it doesn't matter if it's a rich person, a poor person, a person that is, whatever, like a foreigner or not, every person deserves the right for, a defender, a qualified defender, right? Because the law says also that a person is not guilty until proven guilty, right? So you have to, you cannot make a difference between what is the income, situation for somebody. So, well, when I say that, it's like, of course, it sounds good in theory, right? But in,
Right.
in reality, what we see is everything has a price tag, right? Even in the legal system, you have to think, you want the best representation for you, then you need to be able to either, finance a private attorney, best case, right? Or you have to, like get help from family or friends, or you have to put it on your credit card, like whatever helps, right? Get a loan, maybe that's even a, option for you, right? So people have to think about a qualified attorney costs money, right? I'm not sugarcoating that, right? So when you say poor people, they have to find a way, they need to fight, right? Everyone needs to fight, especially in criminal law, right? The state attorney will be equipped, in most cases, they're equipped, brilliant. They're excellent, like it always depends on the court, right, also. But usually they have a lot more manpower, right? They have more staff, they have more resources, and that's why you need an attorney that has, all these resources and is motivated and qualified for you. So that means you have to pay accordingly, or you have to, find other options to pay a private attorney.
Yeah, and it's interesting because you probably have heard this before, right? There's a statistic out there, and I'm not going to try to remember the exact number. They're saying that a certain percentage of Americans, right, live paycheck to paycheck. I mean, if they lost two paychecks, meaning they didn't get paid in a month, and I think that's what it was, right? The study, but the point is still valid, even if we're off a little bit on what the study is. They said that most people would be homeless, right? If they don't get paid for a month, they're homeless, and it might even be 2 weeks. If they don't get paid for 2 weeks, they're homeless, um, or end up going through the eviction process, right? So people don't have a bunch of money set aside, right? Most people are living paycheck to paycheck. And so if that's the case, right, and then somebody gets charged, right, with something, well, then if you just extrapolate right from that study, right, then you would naturally arrive at the conclusion that most people could not afford to pay a quality attorney like you just made reference to. And depending on what they're being charged with, it could be incredibly high, right? Because even if somebody is being charged with, like hypothetically, I'd love to get your take on this. But if somebody gets charged with certain crimes, and I'm sure it's across the nation, it's the same thing. Certain crimes, even if there's no evidence, but if they end up getting charged with those, and assuming they're innocent, it doesn't matter. Like they're automatically looking at multiple first-degree felonies, and most attorneys that take on those types of cases are not going to charge 10,000 or 20,000 out here. You know what I mean? Like, and I've known people in those situations, they're looking at like they start at 40,000, 50, 60,000. If we know that most people can't afford, right? If they're homeless after 2 weeks of not getting paid or a month of not getting paid, then how in the world are they going to pay 40, 50, 60,000 to represent themselves to?
Yeah, that's why I said a lot of people, at least what I saw in this country, right, that people, they find a way to finance even like for medical costs, right? They find a way to get loans for attorneys or doctors, right? Or they have, a family that everyone can, just help them out, and they have to, figure out in the end how to pay it back. But it's crucial that you get someone that is qualified, is motivated, has enough time and resources for your case, and it's not overworked, because a private attorney, you can like they will take on a case if that's interesting enough for them, right? And then they will be intrigued and they will work for this case, like fight for this case. But a public defender's office might be in a lot of cases overworked, right? They have too many cases. They cannot like effectively withdraw or reject cases in the first place. It's not very common. It's like also the judge would have to confirm that, right? And let them out of their responsibility. But in a lot of cases, they are just they don't have the resources and also the staff, right? That it needs. You need like people who do research. You need maybe even private investigators. You need like a lot of paralegals that are working alongside with the attorneys. Then the attorney has to go to prison or to jail, right? Has to visit the client. There is a lot of forth and back. It's not just drafting documents and sending it to the court. There's a lot going on behind the scenes, right?
Yeah.
And like to be equipped and really well prepared for the court hearing, you have to make everything possible, right? And how do you do that? You cannot expect an attorney to work for free. So usually attorneys, like attorneys with a private practice, they have a lot of pro bono cases too, right? But not every case can be a pro bono case because you have to pay all your staff in your office, right? So if they,
You
it's
sound like me now. That's the
exactly.
point that I kept making. Remember during our last conversation that it's expensive, you know what I mean? Like to be an
Yeah.
attorney, and it's expensive to represent people, and people don't always realize that it's not. They might charge $300 an hour, but between the office, right, and then the paralegals and all the office supplies and all the overhead and all that stuff, I mean, they're lucky if they're, keeping, $100 an hour, right? And it
But
depends.
usually, exactly, what I see, in a lot of cases that I'm doing, like the hourly fee starts at, 500, 600, 700, right?
Mhm.
The hourly fee, because then you also have like different jurisdictions in place, and you have to do like the international comparison. It gets quickly higher, right? So, you're looking at like some law office even charge like $1,000 per hour. So who can really afford that? Like, who can afford that, right? So either you have a loan, or you have like family member, or you have, a lot of savings. But honestly, it is expensive, but you have to see, how many public defenders have, enough time for one single case, because every case is important. Every single case is important because every single case represents a person, right? A human being. And this person, just because he cannot afford a private attorney, might get convicted because of a poor representation. And that is, it is the future of this person also, right? So you're not looking at how much money does the person have to pay if there's is a verdict in the end. You're looking at freedom or jail time.
Which is it's interesting and maybe a little controversial, right? But it's one of the hypocrisies of our nation, right? Is that we talk about the value of life and how much we value freedom and you know what I mean? Like you see this over and over, right? Like the value of life, you know what I mean? How, and rightfully so. But yet when it comes to the criminal justice system, we treat people's lives like they're worthless, like they're dispensable, like they're meaningless, because they will, somebody can easily get, right, in my opinion, wrongfully convicted, right, with poor representation, right? If they have poor representation, it's quite easy to get to have somebody get convicted, and it's next to impossible to get those convictions overturned. And if we really value life, it's not just the taking of life, right? If we really value life, well, the person might still be alive, but now you just sentenced them to spend 25, 30 years in prison, or the rest of their life in prison. Like it's worse than if they had lost their life, right? And it's like all of a sudden in the criminal justice system, we forget the value of life, right? Or taking somebody's, even if you take only 5 years out of somebody's life,
Yeah.
that's a long time. That's a long
Yeah.
time to take out of somebody's life.
Yeah, because I believe also it's a systematic problem, right? You cannot always say, oh, that's a problem, the court system and the government doesn't want to change that for whatever reasons, right? Because, jails is also like, it's a business, right? To run jails, there's a lot of money, right, that goes into that. But we have to also see, where does it, can we change that? Like, can the society change that? Are there, any clubs that could be like performing in that area? Could we change that somehow, right? Is it
Right.
like, can public defenders change that, right? Or even the public, can we put pressure on that? Can we say, okay, we need more funding, but we need also better like equipment, better also technology, right? That
Yeah.
everything goes faster and everything can be done electronically or virtually even, right? We need like a lot of different resources that we can say it's gonna be better in 2, 3, 5 years from now, because it's not gonna happen overnight, right? It's like we have a certain amount of people that need representation now, but you don't have enough public defenders now, right? So we're running behind. We're always running behind and try to, get a hold of the problem. So
Yeah.
yeah,
And before we jump into some of the solutions, right, in the interest of time, just real quickly, could you tell me what would be your response to this? I mean, does a fair quality justice system with quality public defenders, specifically with quality public defenders that are not under-resourced, does that only benefit people that are guilty?
no. So because when you cannot differentiate between guilty and non-guilty, because everyone is not guilty until proven guilty. So everyone has to be treated as they're not guilty, right? Because in the criminal law system, it's the opposite from the civil law system, right? But you have to, in civil law, in the criminal law system, the state attorney's office, the state has to prove that you're guilty, right? That is the approach. So you don't have to prove that you're not guilty, right? So when a lot of people say, if I cannot afford someone, right, and then if I'm not able to afford a private attorney, I'm already guilty, right? And that might be partially true, because you need someone to be able to defend you the right way, right? Not just defend you, but in the right way. So it's benefiting everyone. It's not benefiting the guilty or the non guilty. it has to, it has to be a right, it has to be even a human right that you have, legal defense, that every human being has to, is entitled to a representation, right? Because there are so many, I believe also in the US, it's one of the countries, if not the first one, with most of the wrongful convictions, right? And that tells us, on the one hand side, is the first world country that everyone looks up to, right? It's like a role model in so many ways, right? It's an amazing country. And on the other side, we have like, also the recidivism rate is extremely high. Then we have a completely like full prisons, right? That you have no chance pretty much in limiting space anymore. Then we have I mean the highest, one of the highest conviction rates in the world. So when you look at other countries like Saudi Arabia or Russia or China, then
Right.
it's actually not, it's not a very nice statistic to be in, right? So that is something like what a lot of people don't understand. Like the clashes are very, the differences are very clashing. It's very, it's a very broad spectrum from being, having the best freedom rights in the world, right? To, but then when it comes to the criminal justice system, and if you get arrested or get convicted, then the difference is even more, it's even harder, right, than other countries, because other countries are more mild when it comes to the criminal law. Especially Europe is not comparable to the US, right? You get for the same conviction a completely different sentence. A completely different sentence. Like it's even, could look at in the US for one offense that we were just seeing in our experience 20 years, and you're looking in Europe at 7 to 8 years, right? So that is, it's not even understandable, right? So how do you explain that to people? So like it just depends where you're at this moment in
Yeah.
time in your life. That's it, and it could decide your whole future.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, and it goes back to kind of what I was talking about, the hypocrisy of where, you know what I mean? Like we see it as no big deal to if somebody messed up, instead of seeing them as human beings that made mistakes, we make mistakes, we're all vulnerable to this. Instead, like, we have no problem with just locking that person up for 5 or 7 years, and you don't realize you're actually causing more harm to society by doing that because that person is not coming out better. They could come out better, but it's very unlikely because that's not what it's set up for. They're not correctional facilities, right? They're
Yeah.
punitive facilities, and that's what they should be called. But anyways, thank you for that, Vera. I appreciate that. And so let's we touched on this already, right? Let's in the interest of time, maybe we'll address just one potential solution, and we can always continue this conversation. But what would what's the solution? You alluded to this earlier, right? More paralegals and more funding. Maybe more private investigators. It's one I have on my list because that's a big, real important part of doing a good job for somebody. What's the solution to having to the poor quality representation that's generally seen, right, in offices across the nation, public defenders' offices?
Yeah, what you already said, it's a mix of everything, right? It's a lot of like you have to also make it, you have to inform the public about the public defender's office, right? Like what does it entail? And also the pressure and the stress they have, right? Because they have over, like it's at least in Florida, public defender's office, like a regular one, over 400 cases, open and active cases. So there's just too much, right? To be able to represent someone, like, effectively, right? So we have to see, they have to get more funding, right? It's like number one, money like solves a lot of these problems. But also like more staff. You have to, how do you attract better, high quality staff with, of course, like with the salary, right? And also the equipment and the technology, as I said, you have to be able to work fast and efficient.
Yep. Yeah, awesome. No, I agree with you. Yeah, I think especially now with all the AI stuff, or all the technology, I think absolutely, if you can empower them to invest in all the newest technology, all the newest software, all the, all the fancy stuff that's coming out, right, on almost on a weekly or monthly basis. And we use quite a bit of it here in the office, but it's yeah, you could really, you can get 10 attorneys to do the work of 20 or 30, right? Because of all these systems and softwares and all this stuff that makes it easier. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Awesome. Well, there we're out of time. I'd love to continue this conversation. There's a lot of stuff that we didn't touch on that I would have loved to have discussed, but we will have to continue this, in another episode. But thank you again for being on the show. I'd love to have. How can people get a hold of you? If we can, have you just kind of give everybody your handles and ways that they can get a hold of you if they need representation, need advice.
Yes, so you can find my law office online, right? We have, all the social media channels that you can get in touch with, or the website, and send us an email or give us a call, and we're happy to help.
Perfect. Awesome. Thank you, everyone, and we'll see everyone in our next episode.
Thank you so much.